Ah, hello there, Outliers. Niiamah Ashong here, and thank you so much for letting me be a part of your journey. This is the Outliers Edge podcast, where we champion leaders who are shaping the next era of humanity by helping them leverage what makes them different to make their biggest difference in the world. We're going to spend some time with one such leader here today. But before we get into that, I want to just invite you really to exhale. As soon as I hit record, the first thing that came out was just a breath out. And I think like we can get caught in creating our greatness, creating, shaping the world around us, living the life that we're doing, and almost forget to actually breathe. So taking time one more time to just let out, exhale, let go of anything that you're holding on to, let go of any expectations of what you have for your day, what this conversation is going to be, and just allow yourself to be here for whatever purpose you're here for. And I invite that the reason you think you're listening to this episode is not the actual reason that you are. And let's see what we discover from there. So today we have a special treat. We get to play with an amazing outlier. Her name is Rohene Bouajram. Rohene, it is an absolute pleasure to be in space with you. I've thoroughly been looking forward to this conversation. Thank you so much for creating the time and for being who you are, so that we can even have this conversation.
Oh, Niiamah, you're so kind, and thank you so much for opening the conversation with that offering of breathing. I think it's so important to just take a moment to be present and grounded, and so you've done that for me as well. And I'm just excited for our conversation today. Thank you.
Same here. No, thank you. And like, if you're cool with it, I'd like to like share like what helps get me present and helps ground me is actually share a bit about like who you've been to me, like experience I've had of you so far. Are you open to that right now as we get started in our conversation?
Absolutely. Yeah,
All
I'm
right.
excited
Yeah.
to hear.
Yes, I'm excited to figure out what I want to say. Like, because I know I'm going to do it. I just but in order for it to be real, otherwise I feel it gets really trite. If I'm like, oh, I'm going to say this about Raheem today. Like, let's be present. Let's be present. Um, so wow, the first thing that comes to me with you, Raheem, is the word sunshine. Right.
Mm.
And what I feel from that there is that you have a goodness, like a clean, good energy that radiates from you. And in that way, like it's energy giving. And like at the same time, how do I say it? There's a space of possibility, like, but there's also just like the groundedness that also comes along with it.
Mm.
And I thoroughly enjoy that from the standpoint of like knowing that we can go off and talk about some big visions, but I also like know that like you're like, okay, great. Like when it comes down to actually getting it done, like I can have the spreadsheets, I can have everything organized. Like we could like we can actually get it all done. And it's really refreshing to be here. And I think the sense that I get is that with you, I can bring all of my elevated ideas to the table and they'll be
Mm.
treated seriously. But then we can also go down into like the depths of it all and be able uh, to kind of to create a deep enough foundation to be able to
Mm.
create from there. And so I am grateful for you. I'm looking forward to what like how we play off that and such. Thank you for having your being be so strong that that's my experience of you. Let me
Mhm.
pause there really quickly. And then now I'd like to offer you, can you let us
Mhm.
know? I've shared about a bit about who you've been to me so far. Can you let us know a bit about you personally and professionally? I'm most interested in like, what's your mission on this earth?
Ah, Niiamah, thank you. Thank you for that. I think we often don't hear what people see in us, and so just hearing your reflection um brings some tears to my eyes, because when you said sunshine, I instantly felt my grandmother with me, in knowing that the one thing she would always sing to myself and my sisters is a song that I think listeners and perhaps yourself and myself will know all too often. And it's the song that goes, you are my sunshine, my little sunshine. And we know the rest of the words. And I've actually found uh, carving with "You Are My Sunshine" a few years ago, and I put that in my son's bedroom. And now that he can read, so I have a beautiful 7-year-old son. Now that he can read, he actually said, "Mom, it says you are my sunshine." And I told him the story of how my grandmother would sing this song to us. And this year marks over 20, plus years of immigrating to Canada. And it was actually on the night before that we left Harare, Zimbabwe, which was where I was born, that my grandmother, who normally doesn't cry, like she's got the strength of this incredible being, on that night, she gathered us around and, she was telling us how much she was going to miss us. And that was the song that she sang to us was, "You are my sunshine, my little sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away." And yet, that's exactly what happened. So in February of 2002, myself, my 3 sisters, and my parents made one of the most difficult and yet beautiful decisions to leave Zimbabwe. A country that I loved, a country that I still love, a country that is in my being and in my essence, to seek, what would be quoted for many immigrants and individuals from diaspora, a better life full of security, safety, and success. And so my journey over the last 2 decades of my life has been navigating what feels like uncharted terrain, many opportunities of revisiting what really matters, my ideologies, my worldviews, and trying to really make it in this beautiful sort of sea of what life has given us. And over the course of those, years of being here, I have managed to get degrees, a bachelor's degree, and my undergrad was in psychology, a master's degree in intercultural and international communication, of which both degrees took me to Finland in my undergrad for an exchange and to China as part of my master's. And it also allowed during the course of taking those degrees to also really understand what I wanted to do in the world. And so as I was plodding along in my academic journey, I was also working full time. And one of the reasons why that was the case was because a year after being in Canada, Zimbabwe experienced the worst economic crash and the devaluation of the currency. And so my family went from having the savings that we could draw from as immigrants to having nothing. And so one of the things that has been a key part of my identity has been financial literacy and financial security. And so I had to learn that at a very sort of tender age of 17 years old. And that meant that I had to be the breadwinner and the caregiver of my family as we were just a few years in living in Canada. And so that meant working 3 or 4 jobs while going to university. And so I've always been a student, a professional, as well as somebody who was navigating my career. And I did most of my career in higher education and love higher education as a way to really think about how we are making a change and a difference in the world. And throughout that time, and I'll sort of end on this part, is I would say I've discovered who I really am. And what that has meant has been a leader, an incredible leader. And I think particularly as a Black woman, many of us wouldn't necessarily say that without then feeling the shame of, how can I say that? Like, how arrogant would that be? And who am I to be ambitious? I say that with pride because that is my mission. My mission is to redefine the faces of leadership. All too often, leadership roles are encapsulated by racial hierarchy, by who's considered not necessarily the smartest, but who's just got the most power in the room. And in my view, that's really where Black women and racialized women have the opportunity to shine. It's just that society and systems haven't allowed us to step into that place. And so my mission is to really bring the leadership that we have, that is within us, to the forefront of the change and the generation of possibilities that lie before us. And it's my hope that those that I meet, the organizations I work with, will be on the same mission and see that there is an abundance of opportunities and not a scarcity of limited opportunities.
Thanks, Rohene. Like as we get started, I'm like really immersing myself both in your story and the mission. Um, I want to spend some time here really exploring that even further, and then seeing what grows from it. You talked here like your mission of redefining the faces of leadership. Like that's really, it speaks to me here. Um, can you take me through maybe an experience through your own life here, or one with a client or anything like that, where you found like this to really be true? Like you said, like you said earlier, like I feel like leadership, and you said that, but I believe you're saying I feel like in your view, leadership is where Black women and like really like can shine, you know. So I would love to like hear about a story that where either you saw that or the opportunity was there and something was missed. Can you just help make that real for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take you back. It was probably around, I want to say 2010, 2011. It was quite some time ago. And so I'm going to try to remember as many details as I can, but it's a memory that sticks out for me. Um, I had just received a call from a colleague that there was a car accident, and I was working at that time in a university really focused on supporting international students. And that car accident was devastating because it had 5 individuals, and one of the individuals had passed. And just out of protection of their identities, I'm not going to say any further, but I am going to speak about one individual who had suffered significant trauma, both physical and also obviously emotional and mental, and they were in the hospital for a significant amount of time. And a few days after the accident, myself as well as 2 colleagues were able to go see the student in hospital. And we weren't prepared for what we saw. And again, I'm going to not give as many details because the individual was significantly impacted physically. And in the moment that we walked into the specific area in the hospital, we knew how not only serious it was, but we also knew that there wasn't anything we could say or do that was going to perhaps support this person. And so the 3 of us went in and we started off with, you know, the niceties, I would say, but then we also moved straight into the protocols, like, you know, we can drop you from your classes and don't worry, we can sort out, you know, whatever you need. Like, so went straight into like logistics, etc. And obviously this person, not only were they not in that frame of mind, but that's not probably what they needed, but we didn't know that, you know, in that moment, what they would need. And so because this individual was from a region that I'm familiar with, all I did was I moved past my colleagues and I went to the bedside of this individual and I just grabbed their hand. Because from where I come from, when you go to a hospital and you see a family member, the first thing that you just do is you just touch them. And you just let them know that they matter. And that's what I did. And they never squeezed my hand so tight in a way that helped me decide that, you know what, it doesn't matter what the protocols are. It doesn't matter, you know, that I have this title or that I'm expected to act in a certain way. What mattered was, in that moment, human to human, I just needed to let this person know that I see them. And so I sat there holding their hand, and they proceeded then to say, "Are you my sister?" And I didn't know. I didn't know if that was something I should respond to. I didn't know what that question even meant, but I just answered yes. And the reason I raise that is because there is an intuitive sense that I have that I believe comes from my ancestors, comes from the experiences that I've had culturally, that come from the spirituality that I have within my body, that allow me to just know in that moment, whether it's in the hospital, whether it's in a meeting, whether it is for a project, how to navigate the next step, the next action. And so I don't always have to go to a framework. I don't always have to go to a theory. Although I trust those and I lean on them, I also go to, what is my body and my soul telling me to do in this moment? And honestly, Niiamah, every time I speak to Black women, an Indigenous woman, a racialized woman, we have similar stories of this moment that we just knew what to do, even when anybody else or everyone else around us didn't. And so for me, it's how do we trust the gifts and the talent and the skills that we've been given? And how do we trust that that is what can serve alongside many other types of leadership and lead to the transformation of the change that our humanity and what I truly believe will be 7 generations down the road need to have. And that's why I love the work that you're doing. That's why I love the Outliers Edge, because I think of how many of us are choosing to step out of the status quo and lead with such authenticity and bravery and courage, knowing full well that sometimes stepping out means that you're putting yourself right in the line of an attack or a struggle.
So hearing this, Rohene, I appreciate everything that you're bringing to this conversation. The One of the things that plays for me is, uh, from your experience. You talked earlier about, like, I want to play into this standpoint of, like, what's keeping people right now, right? Especially the women that you lead, or the women that, like, you're side by side with, that you support. With keeping them, what are some of the things that are keeping them from entering into a place, or entering into the leadership that you see? Um, and I'm not sure if it's leadership, like, from an external part, or if it's keeping them from actually, like, embracing the truth that they already know, and the power that's there. So I'd like for you to speak to that a little bit here, because there's some components of this where I'm like, I'm right there with you. Okay, so how do I jump in, if that's me, if it's calling me?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that you asked this question, because I think it's also a question that can be so relevant and applicable to everyone. It doesn't necessarily only have to be, for a woman of color. For me, it's sort of two sides of the coin. So on one hand, there's an external side. There's the systems, the environments that we, as leaders find themselves in. It's the organizations, the companies, etc. And so what is available there that truly allows this type of leadership that I'm speaking of to not only thrive, to also be celebrated and to be recognized and valued and supported. And I truly believe with that external part, it we're probably hundreds of decades away from some meaningful and significant change for that to happen. Not to say it's not happening. I truly believe that there's some organizations that are really committed to doing work that creates equity, that creates inclusion, that creates success. But there are some who are still choosing to default and to stay within a level of comfort that they've always known, which, is aggravating, but also sadly understandable. The other side of the coin is probably what I'm most interested in, and that is the internal side. That is the ability for each and every one of us to do the inner work, to think about what is happening within our bodies, our mind, our soul, that we might need to redefine, rewire, and reconsider. And so I think of my own journey of doing my own inner work, the ability to finally say, I'm going to confront my triggers. I'm going to finally understand them. And I did that and continue to do that through therapy, to be able to look at ways in which I am responding and sometimes reacting to things that happen. And what stories do I create about what I think is happening to me rather than for me, or is happening around me? And so doing our inner work and really thinking about the internal consciousness that we're building within ourselves, I think for me, that's what is going to actually help many leaders to start to break the cycles, to start to choose a different way of showing up, of being, of expressing themselves, regardless of what the external does. The external is going to do what they're going to do. Systems are built to be successful. And I've done so much work in system change and also system transformation. And if there's one thing I know about systems is that they are equipped to succeed based on the outcomes and the outputs that they're expected to achieve. And so when somebody is doing the internal and inner work, and it's not quite jiving with the way that the system is created, the external is created, what's going to end up happening is that there's going to be a clash. There's going to be sort of this dysfunctional mismatch. And so as leaders, especially if we're choosing to step out in a way that the system is like, wait, what is going on here? It's how do we keep our internal state balanced and in equilibrium so that when the system or the external is chaotic and wanting to bring us down, or throwing all the darts and the struggles at us, we're still moving forward and going on. And it takes a special person, it takes an incredibly grounded leader to make that choice to continue moving forward, even if the chaos continues to happen. And that for me is the work that I want to be involved in. That for me are the people I want to be around, because those are the people who for me are the future generation of leaders. And that's not going to be everyone.
So I have an image that's coming to mind right now, which is like the storm brewing all around, things flying, all that. There's just debris everywhere, and like someone just being like walking through the storm, resolute and such throughout it. And like there's a picture that just comes to mind here. I appreciate this. If you're good with it, I like to keep unpacking and exploring this with you. Because there's
Good.
I love how you're I know systems, and systems are designed to do what they're like to get you to a specific result. I thought it was a really beautiful way of putting it, and that juxtaposition of being someone that is in a system that has been designed to not to work against you, or to not have you what you're trying to get done work with it. I think that's like, to me, that feels like one of the biggest areas of like, is it even worth it? Am I going to get chewed up and spit out from this? I'll say it in my mind here, because I think the gravity of what you're saying like lives with me, and is in a lot of ways it can feel like a life or death decision. right? And whether it's a
Mm.
physical life or death decision or like a livelihood, like the way that I've been living my life, like I might get fired, I might get, like who would like, will anyone talk to me?
Mhm.
Talk literally about like the shame of who am I, but also like the repercussions of it. And I think I'd like to like just speak through it because I know that there are outliers who are listening right now who are on board, who are like, I feel this. I know what you're saying. I know this intuitive truth. I trust, I want to trust this thing that is here. I know where you're at. And when I think about me doing the inner work and then going against the system or going or working within the system, like even if not going against it, it's like how does that work? So you mind speaking to that? Like, and it could be from a place of expertise, it could be a place for us just talking it out. But I feel like that should be on the table.
Yeah. No, I'm so glad you're asking this, because I think it is a question that each and every one of us we constantly face at crossroads in our lives, right? And I talk about this even in my own podcast, since Unspeakable Leadership. We often dive into questions with my guests around illusions, right? Illusions of choice, and also the question of should I stay or should I go, right? When you're in a place where it becomes so overwhelming and overtaxing and overburdening that as a leader, you think, is this really it? Like, is this all that it's made out to be? And so here's what I'm learning. I wouldn't say that I am an expert by any means, but I'm learning this. And there's really three things that I'll share. The first one that I'm learning is the external part that I spoke to earlier, that's always going to just cycle on, right? The system is just it's gonna continue to happen until such a time that somebody puts a spoke into it, and then perhaps it will like jar and stop for a brief second, but it'll probably at some point just continue on. And so the first thing that I'm learning is that when anyone is doing work that is meant to change the system, dismantle the way things work, change policies, etc., please don't burden yourself with the idea that you're going to change the entire system. And I think so many of us put that pressure on ourselves. I know I do, to say, I can, I'm here, I'm for the cause, and I'm going to change it. How many times have I had to learn I'm not? Because these systems have been built for hundreds of years. Equally, the amount of time it's going to take to completely unravel it. So the first is to set your expectations at a pace that is going to be your sanity. If you continue to overload yourself, and I'll move into my second point, which is the importance of recognizing how much burnout occurs to a lot of leaders who are doing this type of work of systemic change or transformation, or sometimes just even being on the margins from experience or identity or desire to change, that you find yourself in the cycle of burnout. And I've been burnt out, not once, not twice, 3 times. And so the number of times that we have to recover from burning out requires us, and this is my second point, to consider what load are we setting for ourselves that we think is the pace of our change. I'll tell you, for me, I used to pride myself on being this person who had high capacity. Like, I actually used to say this to supervisors or interviewer, like in my interviews, or I used to say this as part of my first couple of weeks in a new job, saying, I can handle a lot. And I could, because I created a load on my body to hold such high capacity, which meant I was continuously in a cycle of scope creep. The scope of the work I was doing was way bigger than perhaps the job description. I would be the one who would be like, no problem. Send me emails, contact me weekends. I'm available, sometimes 24/7. So I had very little boundaries. And that led to a load that I set for my body to say, you know what? Don't worry. We can just continue to overextend ourselves. This is at least the message I was telling myself. So my second message is stop doing that. None of us are actually heroes or heroines. And I know much of our stories sometimes are rooted in, the hero's journey and the heroine's journey. And that's still okay as a framework. But how about if we shift the narrative to being the hero or the heroine or the individual's journey to being one where you live at a pace that truly honors you? I know that won't make the millions of dollars a Marvel or, or won't be like as great as Wakanda, but here's the opportunity for us is that we really need to think about what load are we putting on ourselves? And you'll see it's a running theme between the first and the second. And so I'll end up with the third point being, as we think about the pace, the load on our body, may we create a different relationship within ourselves that helps us understand ourselves better. What I mean by that is our body gives us so many messages. They give us warning signs. And if I'm listening to people who are similar to me, which I have a feeling I might, we ignore those messages or we push them to the side or we tell them our body, no, it's okay, just, one more all-nighter or just a few more months of me sort of overextending. It's going to be worth it. And eventually our body will get to a point where it will say, I am done. And that's often when illnesses or diagnoses or disease can come into play. Why I'm giving this dose of reality is because I myself have had to recover from burnout and from a pace that was completely unnecessary. And so as we navigate trying to change systems, we're not going to change the systems overnight. We might have to recognize that change will happen incrementally. And so therefore set our sights and our goals based on that incremental change. And then make sure that every time that we are navigating the change as leaders, that we're listening to what our body are telling us, that we're actually paying attention to the messages. We're recognizing when we're around certain people, what does our energy feel like? Are we drained or are we fueled? And to really then make conscious decisions about how to engage, when to engage, so that we can preserve our essence, our being. That for me has been the journey of discovery and also the journey of self-love. I think for anyone who's trying to change systems, we need to do that. The external will continue to be chaotic, but the internal can be calm.
I appreciate these three right here. As you're talking, Raheem, what's there's a sense that I have that like the goal changed for you at some point, and I'm thinking about this here, hearing this and a few different things. I'm like, so I get it intellectually, and as you're
Yeah.
saying this, I'm like, there's some components of this where I'm like, all right, if I wanted this to like really like if I wanted to, if I know, I like I'm thinking about the body when you just said like your body gives you clues, like it's telling you things. and yet it's easy to like to put it away or to ignore it, right? For someone who's listening to this and it's like, hey, not only is this clues, it is being stated exactly in a way where it's just like you're like, it's your truth, right? What was going through my mind was,
Mhm.
but I've set up so much of my identity around being that high achiever, that high capacity, so on and so forth. Like like what was going, I'm like, it feels kind of counter to what you're saying, but at the same time I'm almost like, where would I go, in a sense of like, it feels like the goal changed for you. Like it's almost like I'm
Yeah.
used to moving toward a goal, and now I need to shift what that goal is. You might have to take me out of the paradigm completely. It might be like, let's get out of goal, anything like that. Like, it's not change the goal. You're in the wrong paradigm, or let's not say the wrong, but like there's a different paradigm to even look at altogether.
Yeah.
But I want to speak to this because I fundamentally believe that you are speaking to someone's heart right now, and they are on the
Yeah.
cusp of making a decision to allow themselves to love themselves in a way that they hadn't before, to do this inner work in a way that they hadn't before. And there are, like, in my mind, I'm like, if we can just keep removing any of the rocks that get in the way
Mhm.
of them saying yes
Yeah.
and starting down this journey, I want to go for it.
Yeah. Oh, Niiamah, I'm so glad you're asking that, and you're really picking up on what does somebody who is on this cusp of openness and, like you said, intellectually understands that something has to change, and at the same time it's easier said than done. And so here's something that I'll offer that I hope is helpful. I think for many individuals, and I do, when I look at systems and some of the work that I do, I look at it from, intersectionality, which is, a framework that has been offered by Kimberly Crenshaw that really looks at different dimensions of identity, race, culture, sexual orientation, neurodivergence, disability, accessibility, etc. And there's many dimensions. Um, and some of them are, socially constructed, and some of them are choices that can happen over time. Because, for example, there's like an um, education level dimension. So when I look at this framework and I think about the question that you've asked, I think of our identity and how it's been shaped over time. As part of my own inner work, I've been really deeply reflecting, and I've been doing this with an incredible group based out of Australia through a program called Life University. And what I've been learning a lot about is how, from as young as 2 years of age, that load that I mentioned is almost set already. So between birth until 2 years of age, so many life experiences kind of wire our brain to see the world the way that the rest of our life is navigated. And so if you are perhaps raised in a place that has very little adverse experiences or trauma, then you might then go through the world in a different way from somebody who perhaps experiences more adversity, more trauma, etc. Now, if we think about that, that means that every individual is going to experience some level of adversity and trauma, because I don't think I've ever met anyone who have said they've coasted through life perfectly. So what this means then is, as we navigate life, we're making choices on how to act and to receive love based on what we do. And it could even be what we do for others, what we do for our caregivers, what we do for our teachers when we then eventually go to school, what we do for our classmates, what we do for our friends. And it just continues to compound over life. And that is relational. How we interact with each other is based on what we have set as that load and what we're doing. Now, this is where I think a lot of people will say, if they reflected, they'll say, well, I might have been a people pleaser, or I might have been rebellious. I might have held a lot of imposter syndrome, or I might have withdrawn. And there could be a list of others, and not to say that they're sort of, those are the, opposing areas, but these are just sort of examples that I'm giving. And at no point are any of us actually taught how to be. Right? If we think about it, our entire school system, how we are scaffolded into life, how we are taught even through relationships is what do we do for each other? Which means our worthiness and our self-concept becomes defined by that. Now, how do we actually just be? Is the question for me that I keep coming back to, because I've struggled with this question. I'm like, but isn't that one and the same as doing? Like, like I'm doing something, so I'm being something. No. It's not. Being is being who you were always meant to be. And some will equate that to purpose. Some will equate that to finding your passion. Some will equate that to rest. And so for me, I think you talked about paradigm shift. That's the paradigm shift for each and every one of us as we navigate, is to ask ourselves, who are you when you're just being you? Who are you? And I struggle with this question. And I'm going to ask the listeners, who are you when you're just being you? And can you catch yourself in moments when you're just being you? Is it that moment where you're laughing so hard with a friend that you snort and you fart at the same time and you're like, oh my God, so embarrassing? Or is it that moment when you are leading the most incredible conversation that's heated and is full of emotion, and yet you know that this conversation is going to be the conversation that's going to turn everyone's next steps, next behaviors, which is often the spaces that I find myself in. And you can see the alchemy of change happening just before your eyes. That is sometimes equated to being in flow. So how many of us are experiencing that on a daily basis of being you? I bet if I had to put, $20 or higher, not many of us will say every day. And we might then quickly respond, well, that's impossible. Who actually lives like that? There are actually people who do. I'm not one of them yet. I'm working towards that person. This year, I'm turning 40. And I'm so excited. The reason is because I have made a commitment to myself that after 4 decades of living on this earth and seeing everything that I've seen, experience everything that I've experienced, both good and bad and ugly and everything in between, my commitment is, if I'm fortunate to live another 40 more years, I want it to be a different 40. Why? Because I actually have control now. When you are under 2 years of age, when you're a child, when you're even a young adolescent, you are dependent on what people are showing you. You are dependent on what is being offered to you in terms of life, reality, experiences. You're influenced by external, right? At some point in anyone's life journey, you can turn the table around. And so I'll end off with saying, what choice are you making today to turn the table around, to stop doing and to being you, to being the person you were always meant to be, living in your authenticity, living in truth and integrity, and letting the external be the external.
Well, I have to thank you for that. Here, like, um, look, I think I recognize like I was moved to tears earlier, like it's really impacting me here. So I think like we're gonna start wrapping up, but I think there's a reality to this here. And I think there was something in what you were saying here around like that just keeps getting in to deep within me around like how does
Mm-hmm.
change actually come about. Um, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for one of the things I feel like you offered here is space, you know, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
space, you know, for taking off pressure. I mean, like, look at it, like it took hundreds of years to get here. And I think that's even you being generous in terms of the systems that we have in place right now. Um, but it took hundreds of years for us to, for what we are experiencing to come into place. Um, it's not going to be turned over overnight. Um, the components of really doing that inner work so that you can remain solid and steadfast. And these are some of my like my words and not yours per se, but as the chaos is going around you. Um, and then uh, when you were just talking about like the 2 year old and how you how much is formed by that period, and then thinking about when you're saying like, hey, I'm turning 40, it got me thinking. I have this my experience of life is that like I have these like underclassmen, upperclassmen moments. And you said you're in higher education, so maybe you would appreciate this. But it's like um I remember the first 2 years of college going in and doing as an underclassman does, and then coming in like by junior year, and it's like same school, same like you know, same everything was the same, but how I interacted with it was no longer that of one who did not know, you know, and the way that I navigated from that moment on the surface, everything was the same, but internally
Yeah.
the experience of it was one of ownership of bringing on the next thing and making choice after choice after choice as opposed to just going with the flow of what was around. And I just got that sense when you were talking about this where it's like, oh, like I'm becoming an upperclassman of my life, my
Mm.
words, not yours. But it spoke to me, it spoke to me right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I love that. I love like we can choose different different ways to see it. So I'm actually borrowing something that the instructor and organizer of this live university that I've been doing with Dr. Mardell mentioned, and he said to me, the the passage of 40s and 50s are often termed this midlife crisis. And that's how, most people, will view it. And so therefore you look at it through that lens of a midlife crisis. And he said, well, what if we saw it as a midlife passage, a passage to being different? And so I think of even what you just shared, Niiamah, is we have these identity markers that culturally are defined, and the system sometimes creates it, and it changes our vibration internally. It gives us a different way of how we're going to now show up and express ourselves and be. And so as we are on our own journey of redefining how we want to be in the world, what else speaks to us that helps us embrace the change that we want to see in ourselves, regardless of what happens out there? I think that is so exciting. And I love that. So thank you for adding what is also resonating for you.
Yeah, I feel the excitement here, and like I can keep going on this conversation. I think we're gonna have to have a part two or something at some point here. The Let's do this. Let's wrap up for today. And the way I want to wrap up is this. Um, One, I love for you to share what I call an outsight, right? So the insights are things
Mhm.
that you gain from yourself along here. But an outsight is something that like the way I decided to define it, is something that you want to pass on to someone else, you know?
Mhm.
So what's a takeaway? What's an outsight that you have for anyone that's listening to this, especially those that are like
Mhm.
that know what you're saying to be true and are like just on that cusp of really stepping into doing their inner work in a meaningful way.
Yeah. I say to you who are listening, um, let go just 5% less each day. Just let go. Let go of the expectation. Let go of I must, I should, I could, if what. Let go and just see every day how that feels. And if you notice a shift, increase it an extra percent, an extra 2%, until such a time that you get to whatever new load that feels right for you, that allows you to now say, okay, I'm being myself. Like, this is it. That's what I would offer, and hold with gratitude and hope that at one point in time we'll meet and you'll say, guess what? I let go. And it didn't kill me. It didn't hurt me. Nothing actually broke. I healed and I'm different now.
I appreciate that. So let's now then wrap up this here with for anyone who wants to continue down the journey with you, who's like, yes, Raheem, like more, give like I'm in. What's the best way for them to do that?
The best way would be to follow me on Instagram under Unspeakable Leadership. I also have my website. Just if you put in my name, Rohene Bouajram, you'll be able to find out more details. And then, of course, you can always like and follow and add me on LinkedIn. Those are sort of the three ways that I would love to get to know you. And I truly love relationship building and connecting as humans. And so please, if anyone would love to just talk and just be and just have, coffee or connect, I'm very much open. So thank you so much, Niiamah, for having me here. It's been such an incredible, I can't believe how quick time goes. And so I'm very much grateful for the time that you've given and the space that you've created, and for being a person who can be so open and so inviting to seeing the depths of my soul and my brain all at the same time.
Thank you for putting it out there. It's hard to not experience you, which is really wonderful. It's really, really wonderful. So Raheen, I ended this conversation with one question. I call it the time capsule question. And it's about leaving a message for yourself. Leaving wisdom that you know in this moment of something that you want to be able to be reminded of again, let's say in a decade's worth of time, right?
Mm.
So this is for you here, but what's something that you know to be true, or you know that you like you just don't want to forget, and just like, hey, future Raheen, like don't forget this. What would that be?
Yeah. I would say to future Roheen, I'm so proud of you. I know it wasn't easy. It never is to be the first to break a cycle. And I have no doubt that the choices that you've made will continue to amplify and activate the very life we were meant to live. And I would go probably even a step further and say to you, and I can't wait for our great, great, great granddaughter to know who you and I are. I love you.
With that, Rohene, we will conclude for today. Thank you so much for being you. Thank you for bringing everything to this table, and thank you for the gift you give me, which is just like to think in longevity, you know, and to really expand the time horizon around what. Yeah, just expand my time horizon around what I think is possible and what I feel I need to be a part of. Um, Outliers, we've been gifted with this conversation, and I hope that we go and make something of it. All right. With that, here, Raheem, talk to you soon.
Definitely. Thank you, Niiamah. Take care, everyone.
Yeah. Journey on.